This is Turd Flinging Monkey for TFM News. I'm going to be responding to an article called Privatizing Marriage is a Terrible Idea by Shikha Dalmia for Reason.com. Now this is interesting because I'm a libertarian and Reason is a magazine/website that's produced by libertarians and they produce libertarian content. So it's interesting that the gynocentrism at work in this article is so apparent. So basically, if you didn't know, because gay marriage has passed, there are a few states in the South that are seeking to decouple the state from marriage altogether. Just get rid of marriage licenses, have people form private contracts, basically privatize marriage. Now, I've advocated for this in one of my older videos called Let's Talk About Solutions, where I view private contracts as a replacement for the marriage license as a fundamentally pro-male, pro-equality move. However, in this article, the author states that this is an incoherent concept, that if anything will actually increase, not decrease, government interference in marriage. Now let's see what she actually is talking about. And this is a she, which should really tell you most of what you need to know. So I'm just going to quote this paragraph, which kind of explains the premise of her argument. Quote, "At the most basic level, even if we can get government out of the business of issuing marriage licenses, it still has to register these partnerships and/or authorize the entities that perform them before these unions have any legal validity, just as it registers property and issues titles and deeds. Therefore, government would need to set up rules and regulations as to what counts as a legitimate marriage deed. It won't and can't simply accept any marriage performed in any church or any domestic partnership written by anyone." Unquote. Now, that kind of makes sense at a point. The government does have to recognize these unions, right? If the government doesn't recognize the union, then what's the point? And to that I say, exactly. The government doesn't need to recognize jack shit. Who cares? Who cares? A family can exist without marriage. Families exist in nature, in animals, that have no concept of religion or government. The family is a natural unit. Marriage is not, and it's only gotten worse over time. In order to form my argument, we need to talk about what marriage is. So let's talk about how they define marriage in the article. So, quote, "Just as property rights, at least in principle, establish the scope and limits of state power over an individual, marriage does something similar for couples. It basically establishes their right to jointly own property and inherit it from each other, keep and raise their children, and make medical decisions for the other when one is incapacitated. The government can't grab their children or their property without a compelling interest, and it must prevent others from doing so as well. For example, in-laws can't simply take away children because they think their daughter-in-law is an unfit mother or overrule her end-of-life decisions for their son. Couples can voluntarily and jointly cede some of their authority to others in special circumstances, but marriage creates a default presumption of their rights as well as their responsibilities. For example, no one can just take away their children, they can't abandon their kids either." Unquote. Maybe 100 or so years ago. Here's what's changed. Marriage no longer jointly benefits both parties. It now exclusively benefits the woman, and I can prove this right now. Think about what marriage does, what guarantees it provides to a woman. A woman marries a man. She now has guaranteed sources of income for the rest of her life, assuming they stay married for the limited amount of years that it takes to qualify for alimony, usually 5 to 10 years depending on where you are. So you stay married for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and now you have guaranteed access to your ex-husband's income even if you get a divorce. Also, if you have kids together, you have guaranteed access to your husband's income in the form of child support. That's what a woman gets. Those are the benefits she gets in a marriage. Now, what does the woman give in a marriage? What is she giving the man in exchange for guaranteed access to his income? Presumably for the rest of her life if they're married for a certain number of years. Let me rephrase that. What guarantees does the man have? What is the man guaranteed? He's giving up a lot. He's risking a lot to get married. What is he getting in return for all this risk he's assuming? Nothing. He's not getting anything. Think about it. He's not getting guaranteed sex. A wife isn't required to have sex with her husband. And as feminists keep reminding us, marital rape was made illegal in the 90s. So you can't even take the sex. So if she doesn't want to give you the sex, you can't take it. There's nothing you can do. You're not guaranteed it. You can't do anything about it. Sex is kind of the point for a man. That's the primary reason why a man gets married, is to have sex. A woman isn't required to give her husband sex, but the husband is required to give his wife access to half his shit for the rest of her life, and to support her financially for the rest of his life. She has those guarantees by law. He has no guarantee of sex by law. Now the other thing is, back in the day, if a woman cheated on her husband, if she committed adultery and they got a divorce because of that adultery, she was no longer entitled to any of his money. Those laws are gone. Now even if your wife cheats on you, she still gets half your shit. She still gets your kids, your house, your retirement. She still makes you a wage slave, even though she was cheating on you. So not only does she not have to have sex with you, and not only is it illegal for you to take sex from her through marital rape, she can give sex to other men behind your back or in front of your face, it doesn't matter, and she still has access to your money. She has all these guarantees. She's guaranteed provision for the rest of her life from you as her ex-husband in the form of alimony and child support. You have no guarantees. You're not guaranteed sex. You're not even guaranteed fidelity. So what does the man get in marriage? Nothing. There is no thing that the man gets in a marriage that compensates him for the risks he's taking and for what he's giving up and for what he's giving the woman in the form of these guaranteed access to his income. She gets everything, he gets nothing. That's modern marriage. That's why MGTOW exists. That's why men aren't getting married anymore. And all of this has to do with feminist laws and the way the government has liberated women from all of their responsibilities. Now, the question then becomes, if marriage is such a shitty deal for men, there's only two ways to fix it. One, you can reinstitute the duties that the wife had to the husband, which isn't going to happen with women being the majority voters and feminism and all that shit. It's not going to happen. Or you can liberate men, take away the man's responsibilities. But then at that point, if the man isn't providing any guaranteed income to the woman, and the woman isn't providing any guaranteed sex to the man, which is already the case, then what's the point of marriage? And the answer is, there is no point of marriage. Right now, in 2015, marriage does not benefit men at all. It only benefits women. And if you try to make things equal by taking away the responsibilities that the man has to the woman, just like you've liberated women from the responsibilities they have to men, then there's no point in marriage. You might as well just get rid of marriage altogether. Now, some of these things they were talking about, there are ways to do this without marriage. For example, these are the listed benefits for marriage. Jointly owned property. Do you really want to jointly own property? This doesn't benefit the man at all. The man pays for the property. The woman doesn't pay for shit. Why is she entitled to half of your shit? If you bought the car and you get a divorce, why do you have to sell the car and give her half the proceeds? If it's your house, you're the one who bought it, you're the one who makes the payments on it, why does she get half? Fuck joint property. You get what you bring in. If you brought in a house, it's your fucking house. She doesn't get half. And if you're the breadwinner and you're the woman and you marry a guy who's unemployed, whatever, and it's your house, then you keep the house. I don't care who keeps the house. The person who bought the house keeps the house. Jointly owned property is a benefit only to the inferior party that doesn't own anything. And they shouldn't be entitled to your shit. If you paid for it, it's yours. So fuck jointly owned property. Now, if a couple wants to get together and designate certain things as jointly owned property, they can do that through a private contract. That's easy. Now, the next thing is inherit property from each other. Okay, well that's just can be done through a will or a living trust. You don't have to be married to inherit other people's property or designate property to be inheritable to someone else. You can do that through any legal document. So you don't need marriage for either one of those things. Keep and raise their children. Okay, so again, animals have families without marriage. Humans can have families too without marriage. So keep and raise their children. The man doesn't get to keep and raise his children in a divorce. The woman always gets the kids. Again, marriage only benefits women. It allows the woman to keep and raise her children and forces the man to keep her provided for. This isn't a good deal for men. This isn't equitable to both parties. It only benefits the woman. This can be done with a contract as well. Instead of having a marriage license, have a private contract saying, when we have kids, if we get a divorce or decide we don't want to live together anymore, we have joint custody 50-50 with no child support, period. Done. Easy. Or whatever. Maybe he doesn't want to be a father and he's like, you know what, I want you to have the kids and I'll agree to pay you so-and-so. The point is it's mutually agreed upon by the individuals. It's not imposed on them from a government. And the last benefit they list is to make medical decisions for the other when one is incapacitated. This is also known as end-of-life instructions or even a special power of attorney. You don't need to be married to do this either. Alright, now I want to quote one more paragraph from the article. It says, and I quote, "Without marriage, every aspect of a couple's relationship would have to be contractually worked out from scratch in advance. This may or may not prove to be an onerous inconvenience. Some people speculate that companies would start marketing canned contracts to couples. But without licenses or registration for marriages, many things, including established paternity, would get really messy. When a couple is in a recognized marriage, the children in their custody are presumed to be theirs, either because they bore them or adopted them. Who fucking cares? Who fucking cares? I want a marriage contract to be really long and complicated. I want everything spelled out in black and white. You can get married. It's a very simple, sign here, you're married, ta-da. And you don't even know what you're getting into. You don't know what you're agreeing to. That's not a contract. That's some bullshit. As an example, if you look at the amount of documentation you need to buy a home, to get a mortgage, let me just go through it. First of all, you need the deed, the bill of sale, the affidavit of title or seller's affidavit, transfer tax declarations, buyer-seller settlement statement, the note, the mortgage, the loan application, truth in lending disclosure. You need all these documents to get a mortgage because they want to make sure that you understand what you're getting into. But when it comes to marriage, they just want to give away licenses like they're candy. And the man doesn't understand what he's getting into. He doesn't understand what he's agreeing to. He's locking this girl down so he can have exclusive sexual access to her, but the law doesn't give him that power. She can cheat on him, she can not give him sex, and he has no authority to demand it. So to go back to the paragraph, everything would have to be worked out from scratch in advance. Yes, that's what I want. I want every aspect of this marriage, what this relationship means, to be spelled out in advance so that the man knows exactly what he's signing up for. And if he doesn't like something, he takes it out of the contract. I don't want to give you half my shit if you leave me, so we're going to take that out. But it would be a prenup that would actually work because it's worked into the actual contract, as opposed to being an addendum that could be thrown out by a judge. And it's spelled out, and both of you are agreeing to it in order to move forward. If one of you doesn't like terms of the contract, you don't move forward. So there would be some haggling. The woman would be like, well, I want access to half your shit if we get divorced. Well, then the man's going to say, well, what do I get? What am I getting in exchange for this risk I'm taking? How do I know that you're not marrying me to get my money? And then she would have to provide something in return. This is called business. This is how it's supposed to work. What does a woman have to provide to a man in order to get access to half his shit? Nothing. And about it being an onerous inconvenience, I would think that the paperwork involved in a mortgage is pretty onerous based on everything I've listed. However, it works. People buy homes all the time. People get mortgages all the time. So it can be facilitated very easily. And it would be much more transparent and equitable to all parties if it were done like a mortgage and not like the way the current system of marriage works. Now, establishing paternity would get really messy. No, it's called a DNA test. That's not messy. Get a DNA test. If the kid's not mine, fuck you, get the hell out of my house, take your bastard with you, I never want to see either one of you again. Period. The man shouldn't be required to care for a kid who isn't theirs because the poor woman and the interest of the child. This whole best interest of the child shit really pisses me off because the man is always forgotten about. They're always like, well, someone has to take care of this poor woman and her bastard kids. No, nobody has to take care of her. She did that to herself. The kid is a victim, take the kid away, put it in foster care, I don't give a shit. It's not this man's responsibility to take care of this kid that's not his, and this woman that cheated on him and lied to him. Fuck both of them. What about the man's right? He worked hard for his money. Anyway, this whole thing about establishing paternity, mandatory DNA test. If you want access to a man's money, and of course this will be spelled out in the contract itself. Every time a kid is born, quick DNA test, make sure that paternity is established, and then as long as it's affirmative, then X, Y, and Z happens. The man agrees to raise and whatever. And if the kid's not his, he's fucking gone. I mean, this can all be easily spelled out in a private contract. It wouldn't be messy at all. It would be very clean and transparent. So it talks about in the next paragraph that under this presumption, this would create havoc, especially if a marriage breaks up. No, it wouldn't. If you had a contract where everything was spelled out and the marriage broke up, it would be very easy to determine who got what. If you had it in the contract that you agreed to split everything 50-50, then everything gets split 50-50. If you got it in the contract that the man keeps his shit or they split specific assets, then there you go. You wouldn't need a family court system. You wouldn't need a divorce court system. You would just go to the normal contractual business court and the judge would enforce the contract. It's just transparent, which is what women don't want. So this woman who wrote this article for Reason claims to be a libertarian, but she's endorsing a system that exploits men, a government system that exploits men. And she's afraid that if men were liberated from their responsibilities the way women were, it would hurt women. Or if private contracts took the place of a marriage license and men knew what they were walking into. They had to walk in with their eyes open. They had to have it spelled out in black and white exactly what risks they're taking. She's afraid less men would get married, which would be absolutely true. Less men would get married. If I gave you a contract based on the current system of marriage. No man in his right mind would agree to it. When he saw all the risks he was assuming, and that he had no guarantees on the part of his wife, that she could do whatever the hell she wants and she would get half his money regardless, no man would agree to that. Fuck that. He would demand a more equitable contract, and that's why women don't like this idea. They want an unequitable contract that favors women. In fact, her idea, this is so fucking retarded. So the second to last paragraph, it says, if libertarians want to expand marital freedom, they ought to try and spread the Las Vegas model, where licenses are handed out to consenting adults on demand with minimal regulations and delay. How is that pro-freedom? To trick a man, to make it easier for a gullible, possibly drunk man to be tricked into destroying his life by signing up for a shitty deal that doesn't benefit him at all and is solely there to benefit the woman. Now she ends talking about the culture wars with gay marriage. Now I want to say, just for the record, thank you LGBT community, thank you. You're not just a delicious sandwich, but you've done more to help men be unshackled from gynocentrism than the men's rights movement had for however many decades they've been around. What the gay community did by having gay marriage pass and forcing these southern states to consider getting rid of marriage licenses has moved us towards a place where we can get rid of marriage altogether. We can't move backwards. We're never going to convince women, who are the majority of voters, to take their responsibilities back and start offering assurances to men in order to make traditional marriage work. It's not going to happen. They're never going to go back. So all we can do is liberate men the way women have been liberated, which would mean the end of marriage altogether. Because without any assurances for either party, there's no point in getting married. And this is what this woman fears. She fears that without the state to enforce a marriage license on a man, to force him to support a woman and her children, whether or not the children are his or not, that women would suffer, that children would suffer, and that it's worth destroying men's lives in order to benefit women. And she dares call herself a libertarian. So I don't know what's going on, if there's something in the water this week, but this is like my second article about the right just drinking the gynocentric Kool-Aid like there's no tomorrow. Anyway, I just want to close by saying that all women are like that. Libertarian women, atheist women, they're all women. They may have different political beliefs, they may talk a good game. Women are always looking out for themselves. This woman who claims to be a libertarian is fighting for the oppression of men by the state, and she dares call herself a libertarian. Anyway, this is Turd Flinging Monkey signing off.